Hopefully you caught part 1 because now I'm going to tell you how to build 150 lineups for mass multi-entry tournaments on DraftKings and FanDuel. It's part 2 of this advanced daily fantasy golf series, and we're starting right now. What's up guys, Joe Holka here, and welcome to another daily fantasy sports and betting video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DraftKings player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. If you're already a Holkamaniac, you know what to do. Smash that like button. We'll get started. Large field tournaments are becoming more and more popular every day, and if you want to get better at building 150 lineups for some of these mass multi-entry tournaments, there's really a lot you need to know.
Yeah, my best 150 max last year, I uploaded the wrong CSV and won a tournament. So
that's the play.
That's the recommendation. No. Yeah. So I think there are a couple different ways you can do it. One is just the player pool and filtering it down. And like I said, using guys who have at least 15% odds to T20, I found is a good threshold to kind of filter it down. Depending on the field, I might even cut that to 20% odds to T20, just because you really are going to have all your guys inside the top 20. So if you start taking really long shots, even if they make the cut, it's just not going to be enough to get up to the top. So the player pool is one thing. And then I think the other thing that I'm always conscious about is if I am going to play guys who are highly owned, that I still want to try to create a contrarian lineup around it. So we have some configurations in the optimizer that let you set max ownership thresholds for your lineups. So I found that kind of a sweet spot for ownership. Total ownership of your lineup would be kind of between 90 and 105%. And so that way, if you are playing guys who are 25% owned, you're at least kind of matching them with some 5% owned guys. And then I think the kind of last part about MME specifically, unless you've got a really big bankroll, it's kind of reckless to go all in on any one individual golfer. And so I think trying to diversify your exposure is a better way to kind of stay around long term. Like golf is a very high variant DFS game. It's hard to get 6-6 guys through the cut. It's even harder to pick winners, and it's very easy to go 3 months losing money over that time period. Like I haven't had a losing golf week, or golf season, but every year I have at least a 3-month period where I'm kind of unable to turn a profitable week during that period, and it can be really frustrating. So I think if you're going to MME that, trying to control the ownership of not only your individual lineup, but cap ownership of individual players is probably a good way to go, unless you've got a really high bankroll to withstand kind of the variance.
By the way, guys, if you've ever found value in any of my videos or live streams, one of the best ways to support what I'm doing here for free is to throw me the follow on Twitter. Also, if you're new to the Holkamania community, I do a ton of content only on Instagram, so make sure that you take a few seconds out of your day and follow me over there as well. I would really appreciate it. One of the most common questions I get when people are talking about building 150 lineups is how big should their player pool size be for golf?
You know, I think there's two methods to approach this that can be successful. And one is kind of the one that Jason uses, and the other one is the one that I use. And, you know, I'm not a guy that likes to go 80, 90% or 100% on a golfer, because the sport has so much variance. If you're 80 to 90% on one guy and he misses the cut, you know, it basically kills your week. So what I will do is I'll put guys more in that 30, 40, 50% range, but I will narrow my player pool a lot more. So on a given week, if I've got more than 25 golfers in my player pool, that's a problem. I'm almost always under that amount. So anywhere from 16, 17 to 22, 23 golfers is probably, in a full field event with about 150 golfers, you won't see me playing more than 25. And you know, I'll cap my exposure for my high end guys at about 50% ownership, and my low end guys, you know, I'll have at 15-20% ownership.
How big should your player pool be based on like the number of lineups that you're creating?
I guess it really does kind of depend what you want out of it. Like if you're really just kind of in it for the bink, you would want a very narrow player pool. Like you'd probably want to 15, 20 guys. And if you're just trying to, like what Drewby said, set an ownership cap and just run out guys based on that, I could see extending it to 30 or so kind of playable guys. But Drew might have some opinions on that as well.
I would say my MME pool would probably typically be close to 35 golfers. I think that's usually the threshold as far as number of guys that at least have a reasonable chance to T20. And then I definitely want to make sure that two of the features that we have in the optimizer underneath the settings tab is the number of uniques. So that's number of unique players per lineup. And then also the shuffle. And the shuffle feature kind of gives you a random distribution of some of the top lineups. And those two things I use to try to ensure that it's one thing to control your ownership of individual players, but it can be really costly if you might have 40% JT, but all of it is grouped with the same value golfer. And so using the number of unique players per lineup and the shuffle, I think you're able to better diversify. Even if you're kind of keeping the same level of players in the pool, you're at least getting a distribution of the guys that they're paired up with.
Yeah, it kind of depends, but like a rule of thumb, I always try to get it as tight as possible. So like I'll use a baseline of 20 lineups. I'll shoot for like 25 guys, 25 to 30. And that was kind of like a test for me last year, and it ended up working out decent. But like you start building, you got 150 guys in a field, and it's really hard to eliminate people. So I really made it a point to get below 50. And then when I realized like 30 was a decent number, it just centralized or concentrated my core a little bit, and it benefited quite a bit. I think when you get up to like 150, I really don't know what you would run for that. Maybe 50 or 60 guys, maybe more. I just try to focus on a smaller pool, and it tends to help my process through the week.
Before we get back at it, if you like my work and want to support my work, the #1 way you can do so for free is by bookmarking my Amazon link. A lot of people have just found it easy to remember kind of for their day-to-day shopping by making it their homepage as well. So the important thing to know here is what you buy doesn't matter, like literally at all. As long as my link brings you to Amazon, you're supporting the channel, so I'd really appreciate that. Let me know in the comments below if you decide to join the Amazon crew. I'll be sure to give you a shout out on the next video. The way tournaments are structured on DraftKings and FanDuel, they're just extremely top heavy. So in order to have a more unique lineup, you really have to consider leaving some money on the table. It might not seem optimal at first, but you really want to have a unique team.
We did some Millionaire Maker analysis about what percentage of lineups in the majors, where you got a lot of casual players, use up all the salary cap. And the results were pretty shocking. I'm paraphrasing at this point, but it's like 75% of people leave $200 or less on the table with their lineups. So if you leave $300, just $300 on the table, only 25% of the overall lineups are leaving at least that much. So I don't think you need to do it in a smaller field, in terms of GPP size. If you're in a 100-man GPP or 200-man GPP, just play your best team. But if you're firing at the bigger GPPs that pay $50K to first or $100K to first or, $1 million to first in a major, I think it behooves you to leave at least $300, $400, $500 on the table. I think you can leave $1,000 on the table and really not bat an eye, because golf is such a variant sport. And if you look at say on DraftKings, the difference between a $9,500 golfer and an $8,500 golfer really isn't all that much. And everyone kind of thinks, well, I'm getting a big upgrade by going from this $8,500 to $9,500 guy. But when you consider the leverage with possibly leaving money on the table, are you really getting an advantage by going up to use all your salary cap? So even on a normal week, I mean, I don't really think of it as a problem if you're leaving $600, $700, $800 with a lineup. And I think that's something that, the casual user gets the feeling that they need to use up that salary cap. But in golf, for sure, there's no requirement to do that at all.
It's interesting that there's just such a drop off in ownership, even getting to like that 300 on the table. I'm sure it's like that in a lot of sports, honestly. So are you kind of with them on that, Derek?
Yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny because when I see that salary cap remaining as a guy that only builds one lineup per sport, my mind just says, I can find a better upgrade.
What else can I do? Yeah.
So when I do the Millionaire Maker, I can't do them by hand or else I'll end up spending too much of the cap. So I just automatically filter it over so that I have at least 300 or so.
That's why I was curious, because I mean, I'm the same way. Like, there's got to be something I can upgrade as a single entry type player too. But Jason, are you doing? I guess I'll ask you this way: is there ever a time where you're setting your lineup builder so that you don't spend the cap, basically?
No cut events. Yeah,
Okay.
100%. For example, last week the Tournament of Champions, there was no way I was spending 50,000. Unless I had a bet with Colin, Drew, who you had on earlier, which we had a little bit of a bet. But Yeah, there's just statistics show that in a no-cut event, using the full cap, your likelihood of being duplicated is so high. Now, that doesn't mean that a duplicated lineup isn't the best lineup. But if you're looking to win the GPP, win a 50,000 person entry tournament in a no cut using say 49.5, that's what I set it to last week for my GPP entries. I set it to 49.5 because I knew that I'd have the best chance of having an unduplicated lineup.
Just a reminder, if you're looking to invest in yourself and take your game to the next level, I do offer one-on-one coaching. So check out joeholka.com/coaching if you want a little bit more information on that. If you want to continue to learn in more of a group setting, totally fine. But a lot of people don't even realize if they have an Amazon Prime account, they actually have a free Twitch Prime subscription. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. You get access to our premium Discord chat as well as a bunch of other subscriber-only perks. And you're really doing yourself a disservice if you aren't taking advantage of those live streams. So make sure you follow at twitch.tv/joeholka so you don't miss anything. So golf's a sport where originally I didn't think there'd be a ton of correlation. So as far as like in NFL, you'll stack a quarterback and a wide receiver together. In MLB, you'll make sure that your lineup correlates correctly with the beginning of the order, for instance. But in PGA, there's still a couple ways you can do this, and a lot of it has to do with grouping different players together, especially if there's a weather concern, grouping players together that might be teeing off at a certain time that's a little bit more favorable. So correlation is real in golf, and learning how to use your groupings is a really big part of building 150 lineups and being successful in MME tournaments.
Yeah, so for the most part, I don't think there's correlation. Sometimes you get the tee time correlation. At least the way I play, that's the only correlation angle I look for. There are some sharp and, probably one of the best or 5 best players last year, Ben Raza, had a huge season. I know he does a lot of correlation with individual skill sets.
Okay.
If he thinks a golf course will play a certain way, but he's not quite sure which type of golfer it'll favor. So I think some people do try to look at correlation of skill sets. I tend to stick more towards correlation of tee times.
Yeah. So Jason, this seems like a question that might be better suited for you since you're leaving more guys in your pool. I've kind of gone back and forth on if there is any type of correlation or not correlation in golf. My first instinct was no, like there's no correlation whatsoever. But there's a couple situations that I think maybe it would make sense if you're really targeting bombers on a specific course for some reason, or if you're really targeting people that have a really strong short game. So are you trying to correlate in that way or correlate with weather? I guess weather's my other question. If people tee off early in the day and there's supposed to be some tough weather later in the day, will you correlate your groupings in mass multi-entry based on those type of things?
Yeah, it depends. So we've talked a lot about this over the last year about weather draws, and there are some definite times where it is an advantage. So I think it's one of the last things that I check on Wednesday night is if there's a weather draw. And sometimes the weather draw, we can be dead wrong about it. Obviously, it's weather. It's even more unpredictable than strokes gained putting is.
Sure.
At this point. But with that being said, I just go with my core set of golfers, my best golfers, and I don't look at their tee times, because on Sunday, I want my guys to be playing as late as possible, right? So I don't look at that much, and I bring up a case with, especially the best end golfers. It was a year and a half ago at the AT&T Pebble Beach. Jordan Spieth had by far the worst weather draw. He wasn't even supposed to make the cut, and he ended up winning the tournament. Again, there can be the other way around too, and I've told this to the guys before. I don't take weather too much into it. I don't take bombers too much into it. I honestly, I stick with my core. If my core is bombers, so let's say, we're playing a course where we know the driver is the best tool in the bag. Will I take Rory and stack him with, Gary Woodland, and then say a lower guy like a Keith Mitchell, who we know that's his best club in the bag? Yeah, definitely if the course sets for it.
Derek, you think people overreact to weather?
Yeah, they definitely do, and ownership will definitely dictate that. So, I mean, in the past, I've definitely been a guy that stacked, tee times based on weather. And when it comes to the Open Championship, I'll definitely do stacks on both sides because the weather can change so dramatically over there. But for the most part, I'm going to try to avoid it unless, like, the weather is just so glaring that, there's a huge edge one way or another. So many times we just make a big deal of it. There's like a 3-mile-per-hour difference between one tee time and another. And all of a sudden, nobody's playing the afternoon guys. And so for the most part, I think the fact that ownership sways so much actually negates any advantage that you get from the weather outside of maybe 1 or 2 tournaments a year.
Yeah, Bales has talked about this in baseball before too, that if there's any type of weather concern, there's times where it makes sense to fire at that team just because you know you're going to get a little bit lower ownership than you probably should, with people kind of overreacting in that way.
People love to really overweight that stuff. There definitely there will be at least one tournament a year where like one wave will have a significant advantage. I remember, I think 3 years ago at the Valero Texas Open, there was like a legit like 3.5 stroke disadvantage if you started in the afternoon versus starting at the morning. And weather does have like a very noticeable impact on golf scoring. But the issue you're going to find is like trying to impact that unilaterally, like the afternoon wave versus the morning wave. A lot of the times the delineation just, it won't be clear enough to like make good process choices about.
If you want to learn more about how to become a profitable daily fantasy sports player and get better betting, start now by hitting that subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.